I'm one of the principals of Sussex Strategy Group. We've been in business for 16 years in the world of government relations and strategic communications. We've kind of been around the block, seen a little bit of everything, and most of us, my partner Paul over here included, we've been on both sides of the table. So we've worked for cabinet ministers or premiers or things like that, and been on the other side when people are talking to government and saw what's effective and what's not. And now for a long time, we've been helping people with their interaction, and the same goes with media. And Jim, maybe you want to introduce yourself.
Thank you, Brett, and good morning, everyone. Terrific to be here, and thank you for coming. It's great to see so many friends and colleagues in the audience. My name is Jim Gray. I'm a media and presentation skills coach here in Toronto and have the privilege of working with senior executives, physicians, athletes, some entertainers. I've been doing this for a long time. It's embarrassing just how long, but I can tell you that the longer I do it, the more I'm convinced of preparation and the power of the story. Brett?
It's great. And as I say here in the very first bullet, never has there been so much information, as Jim's fond of saying, never have we known so much and understood so little. And so if you think about the audiences that you're trying to reach and how you're trying to do it, cutting through that noise and making your points known is more difficult than ever, even though there's so many more tools and ways to do it than there ever have been before. So as I said, we're going to go through what we think are sort of top 10 tips that apply in both situations. Firstly, preparation. You know, I guess it might be intuitive, it might go without saying, but it's amazing how many times I've seen a situation where people actually weren't fully prepared. Who are you actually talking to? So, you know, in most cases, you know, Jim will talk about media in a second, but when you're talking to somebody in government, what are you trying to appeal to? Who's the actual audience that you're talking to? Are you talking to staff, but you're really trying to get a message through to political leadership? Are you talking to civil service, who's going to have a different perspective on what they're trying to achieve and who they're going to have to deliver your message to? What's your objective and what's your story? The more you prepare in advance, the better you have an opportunity to hit it, of course, and target the message to the audience. And I think the thing that a lot of people don't take enough time to anticipate is those most challenging questions. Again, regardless of the situation, you can pretty much figure out what those most difficult things are going to be that you're going to have to face.
We like to say in media and presentation skills coaching that your audience can tell whether you're confident and prepared within seconds, especially reporters. Reporters are trained to look for weaknesses in your story. They're trained to look for weaknesses in rationale, gaps, and so on. So it's especially important to get off to a strong start in dealing with media and take control.
The first 90 seconds are key, and this goes in pretty much any type of interaction. You know, you guys probably made up your minds very quickly when you saw Jim and I up here at the front, whether you thought we might be credible, whether this is going to be a good presentation, whether these guys have any clue what they're talking about.
We have work to do, I think.
Maybe we do. You know, Malcolm Gladwell wrote a whole book about this called Blink. That's one of his more recent books, and I think he actually says it's in 10 seconds. You know, when you meet somebody and there's that instant connection or there isn't, it's 10 seconds you make up your mind. So when you have very little time to make that first impression, thinking again of the context of you have an opportunity, whether it's at an event or you're in a meeting with somebody on the government side, I always tell people to lead with your objectives up front. Establish what it is you're there to achieve, because you never know if you're going to get a chance to say all the other things that you want to say that are going to actually make your point. And to know that first bit cold, whether it's the elevator pitch, the so-called 90 seconds or 2 minutes when you have that opportunity, or the lead of your presentation, it's important that you're not stumbling and mumbling over that, because you lose credibility immediately. I've sat in meetings, cabinet minister at one end of the table, the client at the other. The client starts in, they're not as prepared as they should have been, start to stumble over some of the very first things, and they might have some wonderful things to say, but you can kind of see the lights go off at the other end because they've lost credibility right from the get-go. I think that that's vital. And the other thing that can happen, I've also seen cabinet ministers who can be a little bit impatient. They also like to talk themselves. They like to show how smart they are. I've seen people start in a presentation, not do too well at the beginning, and somebody actually cut them off and say, okay, let's set all this aside, now let's just talk about this. And they never even got the chance to fully deliver what they were trying to say because they didn't start it off well. Jim?
Well, from the media perspective, reporters today, as we all know, are busier than ever. Reporters now work much harder than I did back in the day. They file often several stories a day, and they're filing all day for online, correct? It's very difficult and challenging to be a reporter. They're inundated with information, story pitches, what have you. When you have an opportunity to have an interview with a reporter, you want to hit the ground running and provide that contextual or background information they require to understand your story. And that's what's missing so often from media interviews, that context in those first 90 seconds. People go into interviews assuming that the reporter understands their issue, and often they don't. So whenever you have an opportunity, back the reporter up, provide that valuable context and background, and go from there. They will appreciate it, and you will get better coverage.
The power of three. I give full credit to my friend Jim here because he's been a big believer in this for a long, long time, and I have not just adopted it, but I believe strongly in it, because it's a great way to characterize something that I would have talked about previously anyway, and that is, it's very easy for people to retain information when it's kept simple and specifically using three key points. It is possible to do more, and it is possible to do less, but I would argue that this is the most effective way. And when you think about an interaction with government, I've got a current client in the healthcare business, and they have established, appropriately, with a large board and a huge membership, 9 strategic priorities that they've got for the coming year and what they want from government, which is great. But if you walk into a meeting trying to achieve something in government and you've got 9 priorities, a lot of people would say you actually have none. And in fact, it opens you up to all kinds of problems. One, if I'm on the other side of that table and I'm listening to this stakeholder coming in with multiple priorities and things that they want me to do, and they give me a long list, it's pretty easy for me to cherry pick from that list and figure out which things work for me and which things I'm going to ignore, because if I can give them 1 or 2 of the things they're looking for, how can they complain? They can go back and say that they got a win. I've picked the ones that work for me, and they might not have actually hit on the issues that are most important to them. Keeping it simple, keeping 3 eliminates that possibility, makes it focus on the things that are most important to you, and I think gives you the best chance of success. So the other thing about it is it makes it more memorable. It makes it easier for you to remember so you can deliver it appropriately. It also makes it easier on the other side of the table for that takeaway, that there aren't so many things that they have to keep in mind at the end of the day when they actually want to reflect on what it is you had to say. So bottom line, less is more. And you might notice as we go through this presentation, we put 3 points on every slide. We've done that for a reason. Hopefully it makes it easier to follow, easier for us to deliver, easy to be retained, and it makes it nice and neat and clean as well.
Reporters crave clarity and simplicity, and a great way of creating that is through the power of 3. Once you start to get to the 4th and 5th point, you can see retention start to drop off and interest start to drop off. Since the beginning of time, the best communication has been organized according to the power of 3. The Gettysburg Address was organized according to the power of 3. And it's no secret that much of advertising and marketing is organized according to the power of 3 as well. So it's not only the 3 selection points, it's the order they came in. And the lesson for all of us is that this stuff does not come easily. It's not, let's sit down over a couple of beers, Brett, and come up with our 3 points. It's lots of comprehensive discussion and testing to see what works and what doesn't work. It takes time to be effective in dealing with the media.
Next point, make it about them. You've all been in dinner parties, and we all have met the person who's all they do is talk about themselves and what's going on with them, and enough about you, let's talk about me, right? Nobody enjoys that, and the same applies when you're having interaction with government and you're trying to achieve an objective. Take a little bit of time, do a little bit of homework about the person or persons that you're meeting with. Search for some common ground. Find out something about them that you can relate to and you can actually open up a conversation with. hey, I saw that you went to Western. What year were you there? I was there in '87. And find a little bit of a spot where you can use your interpersonal skills to actually establish a bit of a relationship up front. And importantly, think about what's on their plate and what challenges might be facing them. So if I was walking in to see finance minister in Ontario next week, no matter who happens to win tomorrow, I know that they're going to be facing a really difficult deficit situation. They're going to have to make some tough choices on where they're going to have to cut in order to try and lead us towards a balanced budget. So am I going to go in and start to talk about the $1 billion I want for my project, or am I going to find a different way to present that, knowing what's on their minds and the things that are going through their heads when I do it? A little bit of homework, a little bit of understanding about them will go a long way. Using you and I, you a lot more than saying I, always important. That's a basic interpersonal thing, but it reflects that you've actually put a little bit of thought into it. And a phrase that I like to use, again, I have to give credit to one of my colleagues, is enlightened self-interest. When you go in and see the Prime Minister, see a cabinet minister, what have you, or a senior civil servant, everybody expects you to come through the door with your issue and what's important to you. But have you taken the time to figure out the context by which they have to deal with what you're talking about? And I'll take a quick second, and here's a diagram that I like to use. This is your interest, good politics, and good public policy. If you can find the intersection of those three things, you've got something to talk about that's going to be received well on the other side, because they're going to be able to put it into a context of how it works for them. This is something I can sell to the public because it's a good thing to do. It's going to benefit people. It's going to save money, whatever that is. And by the way, it really fits well with the people that I care about that are going to vote for me. If you can figure out how your issue fits in there, that's the spot you want to be, and a great opportunity to achieve success.
It's been said that the higher you go in any organization of value, the nicer the people are. Now, I'm sure there are exceptions, but in my experience, certainly the better their interpersonal skills, the more advanced their interpersonal skills. And in my experience, the better they listen. Right? I can deal with the president of a company, and she or he has tremendous listening skills. Reporters loathe it when you make the story about you. It's got to be about single mothers, Canadians, consumers, patients, whomever. So you have to structure your story so your sell, your pitch, your ask benefits others, always. And it's interesting because reporters, they change and evolve like the rest of us over the years, and they're much less tolerant of self-obsession and lack of self-awareness today than they ever have been. And I think it's because they're so busy and they're so stressed and they're so under pressure. And often they're not treated very nicely. Right? A lot of people don't want to speak to them. A lot of people put them down, and a lot of people just call them or interact with them when there's something in it for them. So that speaks to building a relationship with reporters when we have an opportunity. The power of negativity in dealing with the media is amazing. So a negative quote has at least 3 times the power of a positive quote. And again, media is trained to pick up on negative quotes and use those as the focus of their stories. Not to get political here today, but Mr. Hudak, with his million jobs plan, okay, his 100,000 job cuts got more attention for weeks because it was a negative-based focus. So that's what we need to keep in mind as we, shall we say, concoct quotes and think about quotes and conversation with the media. Politicians, business leaders, the rest of us, don't think nearly enough about structuring our message so it reflects the interests of other people. We just don't, and we need to do that.
Listening. I can't say enough about how important it is, and how often I've been in a situation where nobody takes the time to actually listen to what's being said on the other side of the table. I've literally been in presentations where, despite coaching and preparation and what have you, clients gone in to talk to a cabinet minister. We knew we had 30 minutes, Go in, you do the couple of seconds or minutes of small talk and get things underway. And then the client delivered their 15-minute presentation for a full 29 minutes. And lo and behold, 29 minutes later, staffer knocks on the door, "Excuse me, sir, it's time, we have to go to the next meeting." They never even got a chance for feedback on what they were saying. They never got a chance to learn anything about what the impressions were or what the other person was feeling or dealing with. No feedback whatsoever. So what did they learn? They don't even know how they did in the meeting. I've literally seen that happen. And another politician who's still very much in the public realm, so he'll remain nameless, had many, many interactions with this person. And every single time I would speak to him, you could see the wheels turning as I was talking. And all he was doing every time I talked to him was thinking about the next thing he wanted to say. There was no recognition of the point I was trying to make. I was trying to give a little bit of coaching, a little bit of advice. Just more worried about what he was going to say back to me. No listening. So what did he learn? He didn't learn anything. He left me with the impression he didn't care what I had to say, right? So it goes for any type of interaction, of course, but really important when you go into a meeting with government. So many times I've seen that people just didn't leave with the kind of feedback and interaction that they could have had because they spent the entire time trying to deliver what their message was. Didn't make it interactive, didn't take the time, didn't build in the time at the end to make sure there was a really good discussion and you could leave with something productive.
Well, listening is especially important when dealing with the media because you get to find out where they're going in their interview and what their emphasis is and the trajectory of their questioning. And many people don't. Listening, especially today, when everyone's an expert, everyone's a celebrity, everyone's a superstar, everyone's making it about them, and social media has certainly led to this, listening is incredibly respectful. There's a formula. The more power you have and the better you listen, the more effective the entire interaction is, especially with the media.
It's not just what you say, it's also how you say it. And I think that this is a really important point, and again, in any interaction. But if you're not passionate about what you have got to say, why should somebody be passionate or care about what it is you're doing or what you're asking of them? Again, thinking about on the government side of the equation. You're trying to instill some interest, some excitement, something that is going to motivate to actually do something that you and your organization are in to talk about. And I think that if you start off, we talked about that first 90 seconds, if you've got confidence in what it is you're delivering, if you believe in it, it comes across, right? So back to preparation, 70% of what people take away is how you appear. It's not just how your hair is and how you're dressed, it's a big part of it, how you carry yourself too. It's amazing that that is as powerful or more powerful than what you're actually saying. It still strikes me as incredible that that's the way we treat what we see, whether it's on television, in a personal interaction. That's a huge factor.
If you're not passionate in dealing with reporters about your subject matter, reporters get confused, and it's not good to have confused reporters. If you've got exciting news or an initiative and you're not leaning forward, making eye contact, using a voice that replicates enthusiasm, then they don't know what's going on. They don't like it. So you have to match up your message with enthusiasm.
Making visuals work for you. The application of what that means to me when we're talking about a government context is how you go about presenting your case and what you put in front of somebody in order to help to guide the discussion or to make a decision. You can control a lot of things about a meeting, whether it's your meeting or not. So if you're going to Queen's Park or Parliament Hill, it's going to be on their turf, not on yours, right? You can arrive early, you can set up and make sure you're prepared. You can figure out where you're going to sit relative to where the people are on the other side of the table. So you can put your team the way you'd like it positioned, integrated or across from each other, depending on the nature of the meeting. There's a lot of things you can control about the environment of that meeting that will help it to go better. I'll let Jim talk about the media piece, of course, but the other thing I'd like to say is, and I've seen it many, many times, people load up a PowerPoint full of information and charts and all kinds of stats and what have you, because you got this one chance And you want to throw everything you got in there because you don't want to lose the opportunity. Got to put it all there because, my goodness, we can't leave something out. Make it nice and simple. We talked about the power of 3. Keep it clean, nice flow, and take a leave behind document that's got all of that background detail that you want to make sure you leave behind. And images are really important. We've got a client that is in the manufacturing and engineering business and is a major player in the nuclear industry. Anybody know what a nuclear core looks like? I sure as heck didn't before I met them. And I've had the benefit actually of going on tours in the plant and actually seeing these things, and I'm amazed. But when we go to a meeting at Queen's Park, the person that we're talking to and why we want to talk about whatever it is, manufacturing supports or why they should be pursuing nuclear in Ontario, they can't picture the same thing that I've had the chance to see live in the shop floor. Take a visual. Instead of talking so much and putting so many points on there, a picture really is worth 1,000 words. Help somebody picture what it really means that you're talking about. That's one case in point, but you know, Jim talked about how making it about patients and consumers. Show what the actual effect is going to be, use visuals to the best you can, and minimize all of that heavy information that's going to bog down a meeting and maybe even cause confusion because you try to put so much stuff in there.
You know, you hit the nail on the head when you talked about meetings in terms of the material you bring in. You can have 2 versions of your presentation. You can have a simple, clean presentation version. So you have your 3 points with very little information under each point. And then you can have a handout or leave behind version, which replicates those 3 points but has much more comprehensive information. And that's really cool because it makes you look smart, because you can tell your story without all this stuff and then leave the material behind for your audience. Works really well. In terms of visuals, this is incredible to me how media has evolved over the years. If you pick up a newspaper from 50 years ago and take a look at, say, the Toronto Star today and compare them, there's no comparison, is there? The Star is much leaner than it was 50 years ago. Many more pictures, okay? Fewer stories, shorter stories, okay? More superficial stories. I'm not slagging the Star. This applies to all media, printed and otherwise. Much more celebrity news, many more visuals. And what we don't often do on this side of the fence in dealing with the media is think about the media's need for visuals, for pictures, for images. Oh, I've got an interview with the Globe and Mail. They're going to come to my office. What will the reporter see when she or he arrives at your office? A boring boardroom? Or do you have some kind of prop or product demonstration, something that can enliven the photo and have you have a better chance of getting into the paper? So think about this, is that a media interview is the ultimate marketing opportunity, and often we fall short in our preparation. We just think it's a reporter interaction. In fact, we use journalists as a conduit to reach a much wider audience, and we have to broaden our thinking about that.
Sticking to your message. Staying in the communications box, I'll let Jim describe what that box looks like because he gives a very vivid and practical description, I think. But the point to me is, again, thinking about that interaction with government. You've got a set of key messages. We've talked about how you deliver them, how you lead with them to make sure that you get to your points in first. But not getting drawn into long tangents that are going to chew up the opportunity to actually deliver what you want to say. Again, I've been in those meetings and seen it happen, and it could be an innocent question that comes and somebody asks about X or Y or picks up on something that's a little bit off topic of what you wanted to talk about. There's a way to address it, acknowledge it, and bring it back to the things you want to talk about. Bridging is a great communications tool, directly applicable for every single media interaction, but there are tools that you can use in a meeting too to bring things back to what you want to say. Every single tough question, that cabinet minister that wants to challenge you and say, how the heck do you think we can afford to do this, is an opportunity to deliver your message. We appreciate that there's a fiscal impact to this, but how can we afford not to do it? Here's what it's going to achieve. Every single tough question is an opportunity for you. And repeat. Repeat, repeat, repeat. Again, I think of it in these terms, and we've got a little slide about being memorable. At the end of the day, what's going to make your message stand out and actually stick? There's a reason why advertisers bombard you with multiple instances of their same ad, because it takes a little while before something actually sticks. So, you may have gotten sick of the Hudak and Win ads during the hockey games over the last few months, but there's a reason why they were pounding them there, because it takes a little while to stick. So repeat, repeat, repeat.
A great technique for dealing with the media is to think about your conversation, your ideal conversation, as staying within a box. And it's warm and cozy and secure in your box, so good inside, dangerous outside. And your box consists of your story, your key messages, examples which bring a story to life, and transition phrases which always enable you to get back to your story. Simple as saying, the issue is that. It's all about our clients. It really does serve the needs of Canadians. Whatever you can use to get back to your story. Your box does not include speculation, guessing, speaking on behalf of others. That's a killer. You're always going to get into trouble that way. Even if you're right, the person's not going to appreciate it. And finally, limits. So limits of time in dealing with a reporter, limits of subject matter, limits of appropriateness. Always limits. Think about staying in that terrific box. Brett?
Next, taking on the tough stuff. People, I think, get a little bit, they tend to approach government often being a little bit deferential, which is certainly a good way to start off. But one doesn't have to accept the superior position, meaning a position on an issue, or the way that somebody's going to approach that interaction. You don't have to accept the premise of a question, for instance. So, something that reporters will often do, but I've seen it many times in meetings as well, is somebody can start off and say, well, I've been told that.
Right.
You have the right to say, well, I'm not sure who gave you your information, but here's what I know. It's respectful. You're dismissing what was put before. They may have had a briefing. They may have just met with another stakeholder who had an opposite perspective of you, but that doesn't mean that they were right. So you don't have to accept it, and you can feel free to actually challenge that premise and push back a little bit. Don't get trapped with things like, well, they say that, or everyone knows that your organization had killed several people because of your irresponsible drug that you put out there that wasn't backed up by science. You don't have to accept that premise. You can push back and say, well, I respectfully disagree. Here's the facts. Every time, again, it's an opportunity to push back. And I like to tell people, the person on the other side of that table, or people, they're going to have a perspective on your issue. They come at it from a different place. They might be the regulator, they might be the funder, they might be a decision maker from a legislative side, but they're highly unlikely to be as much an expert about your issue as you are and your organization, because you're the ones that are on the ground dealing with it on a day-to-day basis. So feel free to use that. You have the credibility to say, well, listen, I appreciate that perspective and I know where you're coming from, but we represent 60,000 teachers, and let me tell you what it's like in the classroom when we go from 24 kids per class to 30. Here's the difference that it makes. Can they argue with that? Can they argue with your personal experience of doing that? They can't, right? So use your experience and credibility. Use third parties. Go in, we talked about anticipating those tough questions. Go in armed with some people that are going to support what you've got to say. That C.D. Howe report that backs it up, the Competition Bureau, the Ernst & Young report that from 3 years ago that supports the things that you've got to say. Have those things at your fingertips and be ready to use them, because it's often a great way to hit back and actually nail something that is not really based upon fact, but based upon somebody's bias or a premise that's just not right.
We say that in dealing with reporters, it should never be personal. It's professional. So they can be late, and they can be aggressive, and they can be rude, and we can't be. Because what happens when we are any of the above? It's news, correct? All right. However, there are times, rare times, when you have the right to push back, when it's important to push back.
Be memorable. I've touched on this a little bit, and I guess I think about it, and I've given guidance to our clients and friends that are going in to talk to government. Often it's a 30-minute meeting. Sometimes you have the benefit of an hour, depending on their time and the substance of your meeting. but assume when you go in to talk to somebody in government that they're going to have 4 or 6 or 8 meetings like yours that day. So that cabinet minister who leaves question period at 11 o'clock in the morning, already a little bit tired because they've had to focus and be ready for that, has then got a series of meetings with stakeholders throughout the rest of the day. When they go home and get the kids to bed and have had a chance to have some dinner, etc., what's going to make your presentation memorable? Use every opportunity when you have it to extend the relationship. I often say that you should never go in to see government for the very first time when you need something. You start to build a relationship first, if it's at all possible. Sometimes that's not possible. But every interaction you have is an opportunity to set up that next interaction so that it's not a one-off. I think that it should always set up for the next time. Issue a clear call to action. We've talked about making sure you get your priorities across, but leave there with a clear understanding for both sides of what the follow-up is supposed to be. Well, thank you very much, Minister. I appreciate that. Thank you for committing to get your officials to get back to us on A, B, and C. And on our part, you had some great questions. We're going to give you some information on D, E, and F. We'll get back to you next week with that. And that's an opportunity to follow up and to further that relationship. And I fully believe that no matter how difficult the situation and how contentious the meeting might be, there's never a reason not to leave it on a positive that helps you to extend that relationship for the next time. But there's no reason why they can't finish a difficult meeting where they're probably not going to agree on approach with something along the lines of, listen, we're not going to agree on everything, but I think we found a little bit of common ground here. I look forward to the next opportunity where we can talk about this, and we're going to come back to you with some information that's going to help you, blah, 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 right? There's absolutely no reason to leave something in an ugly way, no matter how difficult the situation is. And you never know what kind of a day that they've had on the other side. You can be treated rudely or disrespectfully. They can get yanked out of a meeting 10 minutes in, but never ever let it bother you, and use the opportunity to come back again.
We were talking about this last night. We had a great discussion about the power of relationships and how some people work so hard at them and are so good at them. And I'm privileged to have some great clients. And my favorite client, who Lindsay happens to know, Lindsay Feddison of CN, say hello, sends me a couple of books every year, right? So very successful guy, travels all over the place, and a couple of times a year, he'll send me a book. He'll be in a bookstore. He'll say, I think Jim might like this. And he couriers me a book, signs it. And I work for him. And the power of that is so extraordinary because almost no one does it. You don't have to send people books, but certainly when you're dealing with reporters, you can drop the odd personal note, right? Almost no one does that anymore. On stationery, handwriting, remember that? Dealing with the media, I'm amazed that people so often consider it a one-off. In fact, it's an opportunity to build a relationship by sending the reporter information that they might require to research other stories, to offer to be a source of information even when the coverage doesn't involve you. How about that? Thinking about the reporter when you've got an extra seat to a function at the last minute. All of that stuff helps to build relationships. It doesn't automatically garner you coverage, but, and here's the important thing, it gets you a hearing on the phone, and that is huge today when so many people are vying for their attention. One of the most powerful techniques that leaders can use is self-deprecation. Almost no Canadian political figure today uses self-deprecating humor. It's unbelievable. You know, we live in this world that's so often all too serious and grim, and when you use self-deprecating humor, it can lighten the mood and also improve people's perception of you, so it does have value for you.
That's our presentation. I hope it was memorable. Thank you. Thank you.